The Crannogmen Bog Devils are some of the most feared ambush soldiers in all of Westeros. Vassals of the Reed family, they are adept at blending in with swampy terrain. Their light armor keeps them from being bogged down in their chosen terrain, while their poisoned tridents deal an agonizing death to their foes. After an attack, the Bog Devils simply melt away back into the undergrowth, leaving nothing but the dead and dying. Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name's Brian, and in this video we're going to be talking about the Crannogmen Bog Devils. So, in my last video, I had stated that, it was more towards the end of the video, that I am quite a ways behind on talking about some of the new releases and newer releases for A Song of Ice and Fire. So I had just stated, if you have a request for the next thing for me to talk about, go ahead and post a comment and I'll go ahead and do that. So the only one I got was the Crannogmen Bog Devils, and I have a feeling it's mostly because some people don't make it to the end of these videos. But I figured now would be a good time to mention or request that people post a comment to let me know what kind of unit they'd like me to discuss next. I'm not that I need the direction, because there's definitely things that I'm excited to talk about, but I just want to make sure that I'm meeting the needs of the community around me. So without anything further, let's go into the Crannogmen Bog Devils. So this release comes with 4 unique sculpts for the unit. It's an infantry unit. They don't come with any bannerman, no leader, no attachment. They're just 12 infantry with no additional bells and whistles outside their card is loaded with information. For 7 points in the Crannogmen Bog Devils, we end up getting a unit with movement 6, or speed 6. They have the melee attack ability Poisoned Tridents that hits on 3s or better and has a 7/5/4 decay stat, which seems to be kind of the standard for most combat-based units. And then for defensive stats, we've got a defense save of 5+, and then we match that in the morale with 5+ as well. Now, the side of their card has a ton of abilities on there. The first one is an order called Scout Openings. This triggers at the start of a friendly turn. You target one enemy unit within long range, and until the end of the turn, friendly units' attacks on that enemy can reroll any attack dice and gain precision. The next order is Swift Retreat. After an enemy completes a melee attack on this unit performs one retreat action. Then we have a modifier to their melee attack ability, and this one also has that fun poison symbol that we've seen in the Martells, so we're going to get some neat stuff going on here. It's called Poison Tridents. Before rolling attack dice, choose one. Either the defender becomes weakened, or you attach one Crannog Poison card to the defender. So for the Crannog Poison card, we get an ability that simply states, each time this unit performs an action, before resolving that action, it suffers 1 wound, plus 1 wound if it has any condition tokens on it. If this unit would ever remove a condition token, you may remove this card instead of that token. So there's a lot to unpack with the Crannogmen Bog Devils. At that 7 points, you're getting a pretty quick unit at speed 6. They have your very accurate and effective combat value. I think 7/5/4 hitting on 3s is pretty standard of most of the average performing combat focused units out there. 5+ defense save for 7 points is not amazing, but the 5+ morale definitely helps with that, considering the Starks have a little bit more, or they have a few things they can do to kind of tinker with morale a little bit. When you get to their abilities, that's when things start to get really weird. So they have the support ability for Scout Openings. At least I think a lot of us think of Scout Openings as more of a supportive element because, we've seen it on Jorah, and that's basically all he does is support. But with these guys, they can use Scout Openings to make their combat a little bit more effective with rerolling all their hits and then making sure that they can get precision to throw some extra damage out there. But there are plenty of units in the Starks that don't have complete combat push forward, so this way you can kind of tinker with that and get some of your other units to be a little bit more effective. The order Swift Retreat is really unique. I think that there are a lot of ways that Swift Retreat can get played to set yourself up for putting your opponent in a horrible spot, where if you get the charge off or the alpha with this unit, then your opponent hits you back, you swift retreat away, then mostly opponents will want to turn and face the unit that's retreated from them, but with this unit being faster, they are also not wanting to expose their flank or their rear to the rest of your army. So these guys, Swift Retreat can get really funky. I think I've done this often with the Thornwatch in Baratheons, where Swift Retreat really is hard for people to play around because you have these really strong tanky units that are behind your, or that are in front of your opponent. And when you have a fast unit like the Thornwatch coming in and swift striking away, it makes things really difficult. Now, Swift Strike is much more proactive when it comes to pulling off weird shenanigans, but Swift Retreat can definitely put your opponent in a weird spot because the attack that they're putting on the unit is going to not go very far into wiping them unless you're in that wipeable zone. So they're kind of almost wasting an attack and freeing up that unit. So there are a lot of different ways to play Swift Retreat, sorry. And this unit definitely brings a lot of cool avenues of play with that. Now, the Poison Tridents is the thing that I'm absolutely enamored with on this card. I think it's good. I love the way it works, but I think it's also bad. Like, I don't think that having abilities or things in the game that your opponent can't really interact with at all is kind of a recipe for disaster, but I'm going to take it while it's there because Poison Tridents, your opponent has no say in getting this off. The only way they can try to mitigate it a little bit is by trying to get rid of one of the condition tokens that you've put on their unit so that they try to get the poison off so you can keep the token on. With no tokens, they're still taking a wound. So if you're valuing that wound, you put it on a unit that has extra abilities like I don't know, like any quickfire thing, or a unit that really wants to get the swords or the maneuver. Those attachments with the 3-point relentless orders. So the Crannogmen Poison, if you just stick it on those units that want to be taking multiple actions, it's definitely going to hurt them quite a bit. And considering we have multiple ways of getting tokens on people or condition tokens on people in Starks, I think we'll be able to really make it difficult for our opponent to remove the poison, the Poison Trident's ability. Also, if you're in a pinch and you really need a token on someone, or you have your poison card out already and can't get it, juggled around, just being able to make the defender weakened is not bad either. This unit doesn't have the most amazing defensive stats, so getting weakened on your opponent is a good way of keeping them around. All in all, I think the unit functions really well within itself. Like, it's a self-contained thing. And it also has ways of supporting the rest of your army. And I think that's why they cost so much points, is that they play so many different roles. Now, I know that it probably feels better to pay a point less and then get something that's very specifically aimed at its role, but 7 points for something that has this amount of flexibility is definitely something that can make up its value on the table as you start playing them. So I wanted to take a minute to look at some of the attachments that could possibly help this unit out. Now, at 7 points, I'm not really, fiending for getting unit or attachments into this unit, but I think there's one in particular that I really appreciate here, and that's going to be the 1-point Crannogmen Survivalist. For that 1 point, we get 2 abilities, the first of which is Pathfinder, that just states the unit ignores the dangerous, hindering, and rough keywords. This thing really comes in weird ways. Like, if you've got stakes on the table, you can just really ignore everything about them where your opponent has to maneuver around them, and I think there's a lot of power in that people don't really recognize until the situation actually happens to them, where they might want to use the stakes to be a little bit more of a defensive piece for them, but the Survivalist just says, I don't care about any of that. And with having speed 6, you're really putting a lot on that speed value in terms of getting you in places or taking long bomb charges, and not having to worry about modifiers that are going to slow you down or mess with your charges is extremely beneficial. The other ability that we get on this one, which is massive for the unit, is going to be Elusive Escape. This just states that the unit may reroll any retreat distance dice, and then enemy units that we disengage from do not pivot and become weakened. So the big one here, of course, there's synergy within Swift Retreat in that we can reroll our dice to make sure we're getting to where we want to get to, but not being able to pivot means that your opponent can't really react to the Bog Devils kind of playing around in the backfield. The other huge thing here is that when you get your poison out, you don't have to worry about choosing between getting that weakened token out and getting poison. You just get them both in one package. So if the Crannogmen Bog Devils get their charge off and your opponent smacks them back, they're looking at getting the poison token from the charge that they put through and then weakened right away. So you don't have to put a whole lot of effort into making sure that that token gets out right away. It really just makes decisions difficult for your opponent to deal with. And if they decide that they're not going to take the bait of punching these guys, you can easily just swipe out the maneuver position and then retreat them out, say they can't pivot anyways, and they're also weakened anyhow, so they didn't really gain anything out of it, and now they're just going to be taking those 2 wounds when they activate. So I think the Crannogmen Survivalist brings a lot of value to this unit, considering he's a cheap attachment that really leans into what they want to do. So this next bit of synergy is kind of like a multi-layered thing. So Mirror Reed is an attachment that I think isn't one that I want in this unit, but it's definitely one I want around this unit, because being able to use the order Hidden Traps that just states when an unengaged enemy within long range performs an action before resolving the action, they either suffer 1 hit plus 1 for each of its remaining ranks, or they suffer -1 speed until the end of the turn. Now, this means that once your Crannogmen Bog Devils get out of combat by retreating or doing whatever, your opponent is not only going to take wounds when they activate for having the Poison Trident on them, but they're also going to look at taking some hits from Hidden Traps, which can be really difficult for your opponent to be staring down the barrel of taking something like, 3 to 4 wounds just for activating and performing an action or moving or whatever it is they're going to try and do here. Additionally, you can combine this with the Crannogmen trackers because they bring Hidden Traps as well. They also have Swift Retreat and are a little bit cheaper, so you can put some more fancy attachments on them. But having Crannogmen trackers and Bog Devils running around in your opponent's backyard while you have Mira setting up traps on an objective somewhere, and then the Crannogmen trackers having traps out as well, every single action that your opponent attempts to do is potentially going to be extremely punishing for them. So I think Hidden Traps is something that I really would like to see kind of played around with in addition to the Bog Devils, because the trackers are extremely inexpensive points-wise. They're only coming at 5, so you kind of balance out the amount of points you're paying for the Bog Devils with the cheap amount of investment you're putting into the trackers. All right, so coming around to Commander synergies, I wanted to talk about Howland Reed, the Lord of the Crannogs here, because it's not that he just has, he does have some blatant synergy with them, but he's not really harmonizing with them. I think, and maybe he is. I'm trying to find a word here and I can't find it, but I'm just going to explain my position on him and then we'll go from there. By looking at the cards that Howland Reed brings, we first get Crannogmen Traps. That states when an enemy unit activates, if that enemy is within long range of a Crannogmen unit, it suffers -1 speed until the end of the turn. You also target 1 terrain piece, and then until the end of the round, enemies treat that terrain as having the dangerous keyword. So this is just, it seems like every time your opponent wants to try and activate something, the Crannog army is going to just totally make things difficult for them. First of all, giving them -1 speed when your models are pretty fast is going to make it so it's a little more difficult for them to actually reach out and touch you if they're trying to get offensive. This terrain piece business, if there are some trees, or if there are whether it's a forest or a weirwood tree, if your opponent's hanging out in those and you turn that thing dangerous until the end of the round, they could be taking a lot of damage just for doing their own actions on that, and that can be pretty devastating. It can also shut off a whole area of the table depending on how you've decided to lay out the terrain. I think, as an aside, it's very important when you're playing someone like Howland Reed to make sure you pay attention to how you set up the terrain and not just throw it around wherever you feel like it. You can kind of use that to your advantage if you're using the player randomized terrain system. But Crannogmen Traps really leans into what the Bog Devils are trying to do. It's punishing your opponent for just doing, or for trying to play the game. Next up, we've got Bog Devil Ambush. This triggers when an enemy unit activates. You choose 1. If that enemy is within long range of a Crannogmen unit, it becomes weakened. You can also choose to target 1 friendly unactivated Crannogmen unit in long range, and they perform 1 ranged attack action on that enemy. So with the Crannog trackers, or if you've decided to make your Stark Bowmen into Crannog units, Bog Devil Ambush typically is going to be used for shooting the enemy when they've just for activating. Again, another way to punish that opponent for just choosing to play the game. And then The other bit of Bog Devil Ambush that can be interesting is that if your opponents tried to go through hoops to stop taking wounds on a unit with the the Bog Devil's Poison Tridents, you can just say, okay, I'll let you remove that token that I put on you. That's not a big deal. And then it comes around to their turn again when they activate that unit that they want to do something with, and then you can just play Bog Devil Ambush to put the weakened token back on them. So when they do take that action, they're just going to take 2 wounds for it because they're now satisfying that extra condition of the Poison Trident. So I think Bog Devil Ambush is something where people are really looking to try and get that extra ranged attack by kind of pulling the rug out from under their opponent, but there is definitely value in trying to pay attention to the idea, or pay attention to the fact that you can get that Crannogmen Poison, or the Poison Tridents turned back on with Bog Devil Ambush. The final card that Howland Reed brings to the game is going to be the Threat Unseen. This triggers at the start of any turn. You target 1 enemy combat unit, and if there's an unengaged friendly Crannogmen unit in long range of that enemy, but not in line of sight, that enemy becomes panicked and suffers 1 panic test. So the Threat Unseen is one where I think you kind of had to work to get it to function, but with having like a Crannogmen Survivalist on your Bog Devils, it's really easy to get one of your units outside of line of sight and within long range. Now, if your opponent turns around with that unit and then can start seeing them, that's different, and especially if the Bog Devils have already activated. But I don't think that the Threat Unseen is all that difficult to get to happen, considering that between your trackers and your Bog Devils, you should be able to hide your guys around somewhere to where your opponent's going to get punished for just activating. Again, I think Howland Reed is a really good example of trying to play the game differently, because he just really punishes your opponent for trying to do what they want to do, which is take actions, move their stuff. And the Bog Devils can help lean into what he wants to do by causing a lot of damage outside of activations. Now, before we get into talking about the final bit of synergy with commanders, I needed to mention one of the units that is kind of a no-brainer here, and that is going to be the She-Bears. The House Mormont She-Bears, sorry. So I think a lot of Stark players know that these are just a really amazing unit. For 6 points, you get Warcry plus decent melee ability through Resolute Strikes. They're cheap enough to where if you pair them with Bog Devils, you're able to get that Panicked Invulnerable out, so you don't need to worry about trying to get condition tokens out in other ways. And then you can also have ways of getting all weakened, panicked, and vulnerable out. So She-Bears are really, really good anyhow, so they'll probably be in your list. But when you pair them up with Bog Devils, they just end up helping enable their business. So now we've got our moment to talk about the final commander, and that's going to be Roderick Cassell, the Master-at-Arms. So now you can kind of understand why I wanted to mention the She-Bears here, because he is all about utilizing condition tokens in different ways. So the first card he ends up bringing here is going to be Combat Prowess. This triggers when an enemy is targeted by an ability or tactics card. You can expend 1 condition token from that enemy, and if you do, you cancel the effect of the ability or tactics card. You also have a alternate mode of this card that states at the start of a friendly turn, you target 1 engaged friendly combat unit and remove 1 condition token from them. So this one allows you to get some extra mileage out of the condition tokens that you've been putting on with your Bog Devils and your She-Bears. Your opponent is going to be taking some poison damage for sure, but if you've got the ability to rip a condition token off, if you've doubled up or if you don't really need the extra poison all that much, this can really shut someone down. The next card Roderick ends up bringing is Martial Superiority. This triggers when an enemy is performing a melee attack before rolling attack dice. You can expend 1 vulnerable token from the attacker, and if you do, this attack suffers -1 to hit, and then they suffer 1 hit for each miss. So with this particular card, we're getting vulnerable out with the She-Bears. Roderick Cassell brings Mark the Target himself to get out vulnerable, so you won't find yourself in a really hard space to be expending the vulnerable token to make it more difficult for your opponent to do work. And if they happen to be swinging into those Bog Devils, it means that they're getting punished for activating if they have that poison on them, and then they're going to get punished doubly for -1 to hit and taking a hit for each miss. And if you once you disengage or whatever, you can hope that Hidden Traps does work for them, or does work to them outside as well. Though I don't know if I'd be playing Hidden Traps so much with Roderick Cassell. I think I might lean more into that with Howland Reed. But Martial Superiority, is a phenomenal card, and with the amount of condition tokens you're able to put out, I think it's a good thing for the Bog Devils too. Finally, in his card set, we have Press the Advantage. This triggers when a friendly unit is performing an attack before rolling attack dice. If the defender's panicked, this attack rolls its highest attack die value. If the defender is vulnerable, the attack gains +1 to hit, and if the defender is weakened, they lose all abilities and cannot be the target of friendly tactics cards until the end of the turn. Again, with Roderick paired up with the Bog Devils with a Survivalist and the She-Bears, you're able to get out all of these tokens relatively easy. And if we think about whatever unit happens to be going into the unit that's getting bombed with Press the Advantage, if you're also doing scout openings, you're more likely than not going to be hitting on 2s. You can reroll all your attack dice because of scout openings, so you can fish for those 6s on precision hits, and you're going to be rolling your highest attack die value. And then with weakened, it means that your opponent's not going to be able to affect them. I honestly do think that Roderick Cassell is still one of the best commanders that the Starks have available to them, and I don't know if the Bog Devils are just a windmill slam into his list, because at 8 points with a Survivalist, they can be quite a drain on his resources, but I could definitely see it having some legs in there if they got put on the table together. So overall, I feel like the Crannogmen Bog Devils are an interesting release for the Starks. They're not going to be that windmill slam thing that you throw into every single list you've got, but I definitely think that it brings a new element to Roderick Cassell and definitely adds another element to the Howland Reed list. I really want to. I think these things are, if you play them right, they'll be awesome. They'll be worth their 7 points, but I can definitely see some people having some problems getting the most out of their 7-point value on the table because they might be trying to do some of the wrong things or putting them in the wrong places or losing them to a unit that they don't want to get matched up with. Overall, I really just do think that the unit's fun, and it can definitely make it into some of my lists. I'm looking forward to seeing how other people happen to utilize these. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any kind of interesting tech that you're trying to utilize with these Crannogmen Bog Devils, because I think I kind of went for the low-hanging fruit in this one, but I'm interested to see what other people are thinking about doing with these. I definitely don't think they are bench warmers by any means. I think they're a really interesting release that definitely can be put to good use on the table. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see some more comments about what people want to see next. I know someone poked something about doing a Roderick Cassell video, and I talked about him a little bit in here, but it wasn't the intention to say that this replaced talking about Roderick again. I definitely do owe him a once-over, because I will continually keep saying that I think he's one of the better commanders in Starks that I just don't see people playing a whole lot. So maybe it's about time I go ahead and try and throw him on the table and start talking about him a little bit. But otherwise, thanks for watching the video, and I look forward to making the next one for you.